Let's get into some more issues now with Lisa Goddard from Adoni Media. She joins us from Brisbane, and Emily Dye from the Centre for Independent Studies in Sydney. Thanks both for joining us. Look, there have been calls around for a long while to try, from certain groups that is, to try and reduce the voting age in Australia to 16. But in the Australian Capital Territory, which is where I'm sitting tonight, it got so far as the Greens got a bill into Parliament. Now, they're in coalition government with Labor, and they put up a bill into Parliament to get the voting age down to 16. Thankfully, the Parliament got rid of it. But, Emily, this is a worry, isn't it? We've got a serious push to have 16-year-olds voting now.
I mean, it doesn't surprise me that it's the Greens that are pushing this right now. My colleague recently did a report that found that young people, as in Generation Z, are more likely to vote for the Greens than for the coalition. And so it's clear that they're just trying to get more votes, and they're trying to get those extra people into their demographic of people that could be voting for them. And so their arguments, while they do make some sense, I don't think they really hold that much water. They're saying that, oh, young people are going to be the most affected by climate change. They're going to be the most affected by cost of living. But most young people still live at home with their parents. So I don't see how they're being affected that much by cost of living. Their parents are being affected by cost of living, not young people themselves. So I think they can wait the 2 years. And I hope that we'll continue to push back against this.
Yeah, it's a ridiculous argument because the even younger people are going to be affected by more things for longer. So make the vote 5. I mean, it's just absurd. Lisa, it's clearly just the Greens trying to boost their votes. They know they'll do well with the younger and, let's face it, less informed that voters are.
Yeah, I'm not so sure this is all about making democracy better or about just building numbers for the Greens in the left side of politics. Because, as you say, when you look at the figures, and as Emily went through, by 2040, they're saying 70% of voters would have been born post-1980. So it really just does come down to a numbers game. Now, I have a 16-year-old daughter, so usually I'll do some pretty good research before I came on, but I rang her tonight and said, would you like to vote at 16? And she said, no, I'm focused on school. And look, she's in a more politically aware household than I think most kids may be. So she understands what's happening. But she said, look, all we hear about at school is Indigenous issues or climate change. There's no discussion at all about what the House of Reps does or what policies are, or to look at those broader pictures around cost of living issues. So I just think you're bringing in a lot of people who are ignorant about the current issues that we're facing. And we already have an electorate that isn't engaged politically. So I just think it's not a new idea from the Greens. They've been pushing it. And Bill Shorten was pushing it in 2015. So, it's not new and it's not going to go away, but I think it's ridiculous.
Yeah, I think this is the furthest it's got so far, but it has been thwarted. But speaking of the Greens, they're actually part of an unusual alliance of Australian politicians in Washington at the moment, campaigning to get Julian Assange free, to essentially have the American charges against him dropped or dealt with. There's Liberal there, Labor there, Greens, also Monique Ryan, Teal. It's an unusual coalition, if you like, unofficial coalition, Emily. What do you think? Does that strengthen the case for Julian Assange? Will it help?
I think absolutely. I think we as Australians need to put forward a united front on this. I think we can all get behind the idea that the U.S. doesn't have jurisdiction over Australian citizens. It's as simple as that. It's not treason to release secrets of another country because that's not your country. They had a foreign entity that released their secrets and they have to deal with it, and the only people to blame are the people in the United States that weren't able to keep their secrets secure. So I don't see why they're attacking Julian Assange, and I think Australians really need to not let the US bully them on this.
Yeah, I think it's appalling what Julian Assange did. I'm no defender of Julian Assange, but he has been effectively in custody for so long, Lisa, that he would never have been locked away this long for the charges directed at him. And I would have thought that our great and powerful ally would do some sort of deal with Australia to ensure that he can be freed.
Yeah, well, what is it, 60 hours of travel, they said, for 2 days of meetings for both sides, Democrats and Republicans. But look, I looked at this, and yes, they're over there. It would have been a very interesting plane trip, is all I can say on that front. But what are they doing about China? You've got an Australian journalist being detained there over 1,000 days now. Where is the same effort going into those sorts of persuasive discussions to try to rescue another Australian who's in China? It's all focused on the US. So I think think what you may about Julian, think what you will about what Julian Assange did. You've got that many Australian politicians, I guess, over there on taxpayer coin. What are we doing about other Australians that are being held around this world?
Indeed. Well, I can tell you, as I used to work in our Consular Affairs Department from the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, it works endlessly trying to help Australians who get themselves into trouble in all sorts of ways you couldn't imagine all over the world. Now, I did want to mention the Qantas and talk about reducing that payout, that multi-million-dollar payout to outgoing CEO Alan Joyce. About $500,000 has been cut off that so far. Maybe he'll lose more. I noticed the Qantas board, though, today, the AFR reports, they've all got pay increases and they paid hefty sums just to be on the board. So I think we'd all agree that Qantas needs to do a bit more here to recover its reputation. But I didn't want to finish up the program without showing you the Vice President of the United States, Kamala Harris, solving all the problems of the world for us with this little anecdote.
So 2 frogs and 2 pots of water. So in 1 pot of water, you drop the frog in and you slowly turn up the heat. And that frog will be like, oh, it's getting a little warm in here. And then that water starts to boil and that frog perishes. In the other pot of water, you turn up the heat to the point it's boiling. You drop the frog in it, it'll jump right out. Let's not be that first frog.
Completely meaningless, but she'll laugh anyway. Sorry, I misjudged the time. That's all the time we got. Thanks so much for joining us, Emily and Lisa. Appreciate your insights.